Ladies and gentlemen, I am on my road trip. And the cool thing about being on a road trip is that you get an opportunity to share your road trip with your friends who you bring along. And so what I want to tell you right now is that I am here at a beautiful place called Ouachita National Forest in Arkansas. And I am moving closer and closer to the lands of Billy and his coonhounds. In fact, yesterday I had an incredible stop at a absolutely splendiferous coon cemetery, the only one in the entire world. It was incredible. So I wanted to say good morning. I wanted to say hello to wherever you are, whoever you are. Thank you for joining us. We are continuing our adventure while I am on adventure in the book Sign of the Beaver. One of the brilliant things about being on adventure is that you start thinking about the books that you've been reading, thinking about the way in which certain things are unfolding, and you start seeing the relationship that other people are creating with each other. And so today, I wanted to take our time because it seems that the tables are turning a little bit in regards to who's teaching who what. And that is something that I'm really thrilled about. I think one of the hardest parts is that we have two very interesting characters, Matt and Attean, and both of them have some similarities and differences. And that's one of the things that I wanted to think about as we read today. One of the things that we started noticing in this last reading that we had was that once we got out of the classroom, once we got out of the cabin, that Attean had things to share with Matt. And Matt was the student. And what I noticed was that while Attean learns English, he is not always the most joyful of people. But when he is the teacher and he takes Matt outside, he becomes much more positive and has a tendency to be a little bit more supportive. The other thing that I wanted to also talk to you about was the difference about Matt. Now, Matt seems to really feel out of place and wants really, really bad to be accepted. But also, he doesn't want to be seen as not knowing how to do something. We have the experience of him with this crutch. We have him with the idea of trying to catch the fish with the hook and then losing the hook. The idea of having to walk all the way back after catching the fish to go cook it at the cabin. And Attean actually shows him that he can do it right at that same spot on the side of the river. And I'm really, really thrilled about being able to see how these things unfold as the story goes. Those are my questions as we begin. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we start with chapter 11. Chapter 11 on page 51. And what I will remind you of is the last time that we read it said, you actually think a fish could understand? Attean shrugged. Fish know many things, he replied. Matt sat pondering this strange idea. Well, it seemed to work, he said finally. At least the other fish came along. Those are the ones that they ended up catching. A wide grin spread slowly across Attean's face. It was the first time Matt had seen him smile. So, ladies and gentlemen, chapter 11. I'm so thrilled. I like how time passes in this story. One morning, Matt laid his sticks in a row. 7 sticks, each with 7 notches. That meant that it was well into August. Oh, listen to the song of the geese. Wow, that was fun. Sorry, sometimes listening to the world is really quite a gift. So sorry about that. Didn't mean to get all crumply with you. The silk tassels were glistening on the corn stalks. The hard green pumpkins nestling underneath the stalks were rounding out and taking on a coating of orange. It was time for his father to be coming. At any moment, he might look out and see him walking into the clearing, bringing his mother and Sarah and the new baby. It was strange to think that there was a new member of the family that he had never met. Was it a boy? Was it a girl? It would be a fine thing to have them sitting around a table again. What a beautiful paragraph to give us an essence of time. the green pumpkins becoming round and more orange. The corn silk, if you've ever seen a corn silk plant, a corn plant, as it's getting ready and more ripe, each of the corn stalks and the corn will have these silk tassels that start coming off. And the 7 sticks have all 7 notches on them, which means 1, Matt was being very good about marking his sticks. 2, he listened to his father. And these are things that we have to pick up on. He hoped his mother would take over the reading lessons, which were going badly. Attean still came almost every day, though there was no longer any need for him to bring meat or fish. Matt couldn't make out why the Indian kept coming, since he made it so plain he disliked the lessons. So often Attean made him feel uncomfortable and ridiculous, but he had to admit that on the days when Attean did not come, the hours went by slowly. Often Attean seemed in no hurry to leave when the morning's lessons were over. "Look, see if catch rabbit," he might suggest, and together they would go out into the forest to check the snares, or they would tramp along the creek to a good spot for fishing. Attean seemed to have plenty of time on his hands. Sometimes he would just hang out and watch Matt do his chores. He would stand at the edge of the corn patch and look on while Matt pulled weeds. "Squaw work," he commented once. Matt flushed. "We think it's man's work," he retorted. "Oh, I see. Squaw must be another word. Squaw must be girl. Did you write squaw down in your journal? I'm going to have to do that. Squaw work," he commented, and Matt flushed. That must mean, I don't think he flushed a toilet because there's no such thing as a toilet there. So I think Matt flushing probably has something to do with the fact that his face became embarrassed. So Matt flushed. "We think it's man's work," he retorted. Attean said nothing. He did not offer to help. After a time, he just wandered off without saying goodbye. It must be mighty pleasant, Matt thought to himself, to just hunt and fish all day long and not have to work. That wasn't his father's way, and it wouldn't ever be his. The work was always waiting to be done. But if he got the corn patch cleared and the wood chopped today, he could go fishing with Attean tomorrow, if Attean invited him. Sometimes Attean brought an old dog with him. New character, write it down, old dog with him. It was about the sorriest looking hound Matt had ever seen, with a coat of coarse brown hair, a mangy tail, and whitish patches on his face that gave it a clownish look. Its long, pointed nose was misshapen with bumps and bristles. By the look of its ears, it had survived many fights. The instant it spied Matt, a ridge of hair went straight up on its back and let out a mean growl. Pause. Remember old Dan on his last day when he was hearing the cat, the devil cat? This is that similar moment. The dog notices something strange and begins to have this back-bristling kind of growl. Attean cuffed it sharply. Cuffed it. There's a connection to Migri Sow. Cuffed. And after it was quiet. And after that it was quiet. But it watched the white stranger with wary eyes and kept its distance. Matt tried not to show his own disgust. Matt tried not to show his own distrust. "What's his name?" he asked politely. Attean shrugged. "No name. Aramis. Dog. Aramis. A-R-E-M-U-S. That's for your glossary. Aramis. Dog." Attean just calls him dog. If he doesn't have a name, how can he come when you call? "Him my dog. He come." As though he knew what Attean had said, the scruffy tail began to weave back and forth. "Piswat," Attean said. "Good for nothing. No good for hunt. No sense. Him fight anything. Bear, moose." There was no mistaking the pride in Attean's voice. Interesting. Stop. Another word. Piswat. P-I-Z space W-A-T. Good for nothing. It's funny. He says that his dog is Piswat, good for nothing. But there was no mistaking the pride in Attean's voice, which tells me that Attean is proud of his dog, no matter how Piswat he thinks he is. "What's wrong with his nose?" Attean grinned. "Him fight anything. Chase kagu, what my white man call needle all over." "Oh, a porcupine. Golly, that must have hurt. Pull out many needle, some very deep. Not come out. Dog not feel them now." Wow. K-O-G-W. It's a weird spelled word. Cogwa. So, cogwa, needles all round. Porcupine. Put that on your glossary. Pull out many a needle, some very deep, not come out. Dog not feel them now. Maybe not, Matt thought, but he doubted those quills had improved the dog's disposition. He didn't fancy this dog of Attean's. During the lesson, the dog prowled about outside the cabin and finally thumped down on the path to bite and scratch at fleas. When Attean came out, the dog leapt up, prancing and yapping as though Attean had been gone for days. Matt thought a little better of him for that. It minded him how his father's dog had made a fuss every time his father came home. That old hound must have had just about wagged its tail off when his father came back from Maine. The fact was, Matt was a little jealous of Attean. A dog would be mighty fine company here in the woods, no matter how scrawny it looked. But not this one. No matter how often the dog came with Attean, he never let Matt touch him. Nor did Matt like him any better. He was certainly no good at hunting. When the two boys walked through the woods, the dog zigzagged ahead, sending squirrels racing up trees and jays chattering, and ruining any chance of a catch. Matt wondered why Attean wanted him along. Attean didn't pay him any mind except to shout at him and cuff him when he was too noisy. But for all his show of indifference, it was plain to Matt that Attean thought a sight of that dog. Attean had not brought the dog with him the day that he led Matt a long distance into the part of the forest that Matt had never seen. Following after him, Matt began to feel uneasy. If Attean should take himself off suddenly, as he had a way of doing sometimes, Matt was not sure he could ever find his way back to the cabin. It occurred to him that Attean knew this, and perhaps Attean had brought him so far just to show him how helpless he really was, how all the words in a white man's book were of no use to him out here in the woods. Yet he did not think that this would happen. For some reason he could not explain to himself. He trusted Attean. He didn't really like Attean. When the Indian got that disdainful look in his eyes, Matt hated him. But somehow, as they had sat side by side day after day doing the lessons that neither of them wanted to do, something had changed. Perhaps it had been Robinson Crusoe, or the tramping through the woods together. They didn't like each other, but they were no longer enemies. Pay attention to that. They're not enemies. They're not enemies right now. But they don't like each other. But there's something about their friendship that they do like. Do you see that? It's growing. It's slow. It's patient. Ever have friends like that at school? Me too. Sometimes it takes a while to get them to finally open up and be open to it. When they came upon a row of short tree stumps, birch and aspen cut off close to the ground, Matt's heart gave a leap. Were there settlers nearby? Or Indians? There was no proper clearing. Then he noticed that whoever had cut the trees had left jagged points on each one. No axe would cut a tree that way. He could see marks where the trees had been dragged along the ground. In a few steps, the boys came out onto the bank of an unfamiliar creek. There, Matt saw what had happened to those trees. They had been piled into a mound right over the water. From one bank to the other, water trickled through them in tiny cascades. Behind the piled-up branches, a small pond stretched smooth and still. Before I say what you're obviously probably thinking, what would be something that would have a clearing of small birches and aspen, cut off in rough ways, not like an axe, dragged and then piled into a large mound? Water would kind of move through it, but there was a pond behind it. What animal creates that? It's a beaver dam, Matt exclaimed. The first one I've ever seen. Quabbit. Q-W-A-B-I-T. Quabbit, said Attean. Have red tail. There, beaver wigwam. He pointed to a heap of branches at one side, some of them new with green leaves still clinging. Matt stepped closer to look. Instantly, there was a crack of a rifle. A ring of water rippled the surface of the pond. Near its edge, a black head appeared for just a flash and vanished again in a splutter of bubbles. Attean laughed at the way Matt had started. Beaver make big noise with tail, he explained. Oh, the rifle wasn't a rifle. It was the slap of a beaver tail. Attean laughed at the way Matt had started. Beaver make big noise with tail, he explained. I thought someone had shot a gun, Matt said. I wish I had my rifle now. Attean scowled. Not shoot, he warned. Not white man, not Indian. Young Beaver, not ready. He pointed to a tree nearby. Sign of Beaver, he said. Belong to family. Belong to family. Sign of Beaver. Carved on the bark, Matt could make out the crude figure of an animal that could, with some imagination, be a carved of a beaver. Sign show Beaver House belonged to people of Beaver, Attean explained. By and by, when young Beaver all grown, people of Beaver hunt here. No one hunt but people of Beaver. You mean just from that mark on the tree, another hunter would not shoot here? That our way, Attean said gravely. All Indian understand. Would a white man understand? Matt wondered. He thought of Ben with his stolen rifle. It wasn't likely that Ben would respect an Indian sign, but he must remember to warn his father. When it seemed the beaver did not intend to show himself again, the two boys climbed back up the bank. At the row of stumps, Attean halted and signaled for Matt to go ahead. Show way to cabin, he ordered. All Matt's suspicions came rushing back. Did Attean intend to sneak off behind his back and leave him to find his own way home? Attean, is this some kind of trick? He demanded hotly. Attean looked stern. No trick, he said. Matt need learn. To Matt's relief, he took the lead again. After a short distance, he stopped and pointed to a broken stick leaning in the direction of the creek. A little farther on, there was a small stone set against a large one. Not far away, a tuft of dried grass dangled from a branch of a small tree. Indian make sign, Attean said. Always make sign to tell way. Matt must same, not get lost in forest. Now Matt remembered how Attean had paused every so often, sometimes to break off a branch that hung in their path, once to nudge aside a stone with the toe of his moccasin. He had done these things so quickly that Attean had paid no mind. Darn it. He had done these things so quickly that Matt had paid no mind. He saw now that Attean had carefully been leaving markers. Of course, he exclaimed. But my father always made blazes on the trees with his knife. Attean nodded. That white man's way. Indian maybe not want to show where he go. Not want hunters to find Beaver House. Pause. That's cool. So a white man, the way that his father marks these things is by taking his knife and making a little mark in a tree, right? Like I would just go over that tree and maybe make a little mark. But that's way obvious about what's going on, right? So the reality is that Attean has this whole plan at this point of making marks that only he and his family would understand, so that nobody would be too excited about trying to find their way back. Wow, that's really cool. I like it. I like it a lot. Sorry, I should put my finger down where I left off because my brain is just on fire with this. By the way, that's a metaphor or an idiom. Sorry about my brain being on fire. So these were secret signs. Nothing anyone following them would notice. It would take sharp eyes to find them, even if you knew they were there. Matt do same, Attean repeated. Always make sign to show way back. Matt was ashamed of his suspicions. Attean had only meant to help him. If only he didn't have to be so superior about it. Do you hear that? That's Matt's problem with Attean. He plodded along behind Attean, trying to spot the signs before Attean could point them out. All at once, as a thought struck him, he almost laughed out loud. He remembered Robinson Crusoe and his man Friday. He and Attean had sure enough turned that story right round about. Whenever they went a few steps from the cabin, it was the brown savage who strode ahead, leading the way, knowing just what to do and doing it quickly and skillfully. And Matt, a puny sort of Robinson Crusoe, tagged along behind and learned about the outdoors, grateful for the smallest sign that he could do anything right. It wasn't that he wanted to be a master, and the idea of Attean being anyone's slave was not to be thought. And the idea of Attean's being anyone's slave was not to be thought of. He just wished he could make Attean think a little better of him. He wanted Attean to look at him without that gleam of amusement in his eyes. He wished that it were possible for him to win Attean's respect. Pause. I'm going to put my thumb down. Did you hear how the author snuck this in right here? And I want you to pay close attention because these are the kinds of things that a lot of beginning readers don't understand. All they're doing is reading the words because their teacher told them to read the words and not the story itself. But listen to the depth of what has just been given to you. He wanted Attean to look at him without that gleam of amusement in his eyes. He wished that it were possible for him to win Attean's respect. This is what's called motivation. Motivation is, why are people doing the things that they do? Why are you acting the way that you're acting? Why did you act that way with your family earlier today when they told you that they wanted you to clean up your room? You were motivated to not do it because you wanted to do something else, right? And so the idea is what makes you do the things you do? So now that we see that Attean is what Matt wants, respect from Attean is what Matt wants, we want to pay attention to how that happens. Do you remember the smile on Attean's face earlier? And that was the first time that Attean had ever done that. Matt was very observant of that. The narrator helps us by showing us that moment. It's dropping a little seed about what it is that the author wants us to recognize. Gingerly, Matt copied him. Sorry. As though Attean sensed that Matt was disgruntled, he stopped, whipped out his knife, and neatly sliced off 2 shining gobs of dried sap from a nearby spruce. A spruce is a kind of pine tree. I'm looking around. Right now, it's not hot enough. It's not summertime enough for these trees to be sweating so much. But many of you have probably been close to a tree that has begun to sweat later in the summer, where it has this kind of glob of that sappy, sticky, syrupy stuff. And you probably smelled it. And if you get it on your hands, oh, it smells so powerful. It's like the smell of that tree. But all of a sudden, he took off 2 pieces of that stuff. Listen to what he does with it. He grins and held out one of them like a peace offering. "Chaw," he ordered. He popped the other piece into his mouth and began to chew with evident pleasure. Gingerly, Matt copied him. The gob fell to pieces between his teeth, filling his mouth with a bitter juice. He wanted to spit it out in disgust, but Attean was plainly enjoying the stuff, so he stubbornly forced his jaws to keep moving. In a moment, the bits came together in a rubbery gum, and the first bitterness gave way to fresh, piney flavor. To his surprise, it was very good. The 2 boys tramped on, chewing companionably. Once more, Matt acknowledged to himself Attean had taught him another secret of the forest. Man, I gotta step back and let the forest show up behind me, because when I step back, the light seems to change a little bit. But I wanna talk to you guys about something. You see all the things that Matt is teaching him? I'm gonna hide back here so that the color gets a little bit different. Do you see how Attean is the teacher, and how many of these important aspects that that Matt needs in order to survive in this new world that he's in? Attean has invited him in. Attean is asking him to join him. And I think that this is absolutely glorious gift, right? This is wonderful. Chapter 12. "I must have a bow," Matt said. Sorry. "I must have a bow," Matt decided one morning. He was envious of the bow Attean often carried behind his shoulder, and of the blunt arrows he tucked into his belt. Only the day before, Matt had watched Attean swing it suddenly into position and bring down a flying duck. Attean had picked up the dead bird carefully and carried it away with him. No doubt the Indians would find some use for every scrap of bone and feather. Matt knew by now that Attean never shot anything just for the fun of it. With a bow and a little practice, Matt thought now he might get a duck himself. It would be a fine change from his usual eating of the fish. He had no doubt that he could shoot with a bow. In fact, he had made them years ago back in Quincy. He and his friend had played at Indians, stalking each other through the woods and whooping out from behind trees. They had even practiced half earnestly at shooting a target. How could he have known that someday he would need that skill? He cut a straight branch, notched it at either end, and stretched it tight, a bit of string his father had left. Arrows he whittled out of slender twigs, but something was definitely wrong. His arrows wobbled off in odd directions or flopped on the ground a few feet away. He was chagrined when next morning Attean came walking out of the woods and surprised him at his practice. Attean looked at the bow. "Not good wood," he said at once. "I get better." He was very exacting about the wood he chose. He searched along the edge of the clearing, testing saplings, bending slender branches, discarding one after the other, till he found a dead branch of ash wood about the thickness of his 3 fingers. About this thick. About that thick. He cut a rod, almost his own height, and handed it to Matt. "Take off bark," he directed, and squatted down to watch while Matt scraped the branch clean. Then, taking his hands again, he marked off several inches in the center where Matt's hand would grip the bow. "Cut off wood here," he said, running his hand from center to ends. "Make small, like this." He held up one small, slim finger. So he wants to get it from thickness, right? He wants it to be thick, and then he's going to make it thinner, and then it's going to go up into a smaller one. So it's thick in the center, and then it goes off, and on both sides, it tapers, right? It kind of tapers off. Matt sent to work hastily. "Slow," Attean warned him. "Knife, take off wood too fast. Indian use stone." Under the Indian's critical eye, Matt shaved down the branch, paring off the thinnest possible shavings. The slow work took all his patience. Twice he considered the task finished, but Attean, running his hand along the curve of the bow, was not satisfied till it was smooth as animal bone. "Need fat now," he said. "Bear fat best." "Will this do?" Matt asked, bringing out a bowl of fish stew he had left cooling on the table. Carefully, with a bit of bark, Attean skimmed off the drops of oil that had risen to the surface. He rubbed the oil from one end of the bow to the other till the bare wood glistened. Matt's frayed bit of string he cast aside. Instead, he set about making a bowstring as he had made the snare earlier, of long strands of spruce root. This took most of the morning as he patiently twisted the strands together, rolling them against his thigh to make them even and smooth. So he's rolling them, but it takes almost the entire morning. Almost the entire morning for him to do, right? And this is a big deal. It takes him almost a whole morning to do this work. Matt just wants to get it done and to get it going, kind of like you guys. I know, so many of you do this kind of stuff. But as you guys slow down and do a good job, it's going to be a much higher quality piece. And then you get this word that the author grants us at the next paragraph. Finally, he tied one end to a notch in the bow and began slowly to bend the wood. The bow seemed to Matt to be as stiff as iron. It seemed impossible that it would bend, but slowly it yielded till the string slipped over the notch at the end. The bow was finished. "It's a beauty," Matt told him, filled with admiration at their joint handiwork. Attean gave a grunt of satisfaction. "Shoot pretty good," he said. "One day make better. Indian take long time. Leave wood many days till ready." Before he left, Attean cut off 4 slender shoots of birch wood. "Best for arrow," he explained, marking off with his hands a length of about 2 feet. He left Matt to do the whittling for himself. Whittling is the cutting, of course. That's what he wants. Matt was delighted with the bow, but shooting was another matter. It was not in the least like the flimsy thing he had first created. It took all his strength to draw back the string. When he released his arrow, it flew with astonishing power off somewhere into the underbrush, anywhere but where he had aimed. As fast as he could make a new arrow, he lost them, but he was determined. He pegged a target of birch bark against a tree and shot at it grimly, his arrows coming closer and closer with every day's practice. The heel of his hand was blistered from the stinging snap of the string. Attean did not offer him any further advice, but when the root string began to fray, he brought with him one day a fine bowstring of twisted animal sinew. Pause. Animal sinew. I want you to do something for me. I want you to get your leg like this, and I want you to feel right back here. Right here, this is called your Achilles tendon. And your Achilles tendon is really tight, and it connects your bone of your heel all the way to your calf muscle right here. And that is tendon. Tendon is really hard. If you've ever eaten any beef jerky or something, and you've put some beef jerky in your mouth and you have that little tough piece, this is good beef jerky, like real beef jerky. You eat the meat off of it, but then you have this like white tough stuff that you just you could keep chewing for hours and hours and hours. That's sinew. Sinew is very tough. I mean, it holds muscles onto bone. That's pretty tough. So he's using that as a bowstring. That's massive. which would last for a long time. Using the new sinew string, Matt could frequently nick the edge of his target. Soon, he promised himself, the squirrels would have more respect than to frisk about so boldly over his head. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that is chapters 11 and 12. Now, they have outdoor stuff. I'm going to tell you the next lines that start this next chapter. Wherever he went now, Matt watched for Indian signs. The thing that I love about this book is that Matt is learning. Matt is growing, and Attean is showing him a lot more survival stuff than just, reading. But both of them are important. Both of them are important for a very specific reason. It's time for me to say goodbye to Arkansas. By the end of my day today, we will have driven in to Tahlequah, which is where Billy Coleman, Billy from where the red fern grows, walked in to get his dogs. So my goal today is to go visit the train depot in Tahlequah and just see if they have something there. After Tahlequah, then we are moving on into Oklahoma. The world of the Dust Bowl. Billy talked a lot about Oklahoma. I'm really excited. We're going into the Great Plains. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say to you, it has been wonderful and splendid, and it is now time to wish you well for the rest of your day. Have a great day.